New Hampshire can be free with your help. Sign the petition and learn more at nhexit.us.
The first measure of this ambitious schedule, that is CACR 20. The prime sponsor for that is Representative Gerhard, and he is in the House. Representative Gerhard, welcome. And here we go.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Gerhard, Northfield, Franklin, Merrimack 25. The measure before us today, CACR 20, would declare independence from the United States of America for New Hampshire if the national debt reaches $40 trillion. We would proceed as a sovereign nation. The reason for bringing this measure forward is because I, like many Americans right now, feel that the national government is taking this whole country on a course that quite simply is leading us to financial insolvency at a rapid pace. Online, we have many of these debt clocks, and we're already over 34 trillion. When we hit 40 trillion, I'm not sure, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And I'm concerned that, as many have said, the national debt is the greatest national security risk that we face. So this is a measure to prevent New Hampshire from falling into a catastrophe that I don't think the world has seen before, since we do have the reserve currency and they are printing it like it's going out of style. So, just a little fact sheet that you'll find on your tables that was provided. This legislation, to state what this actually does. This legislation proposes an amendment following Article 7 of the New Hampshire Constitution that if the U.S. national debt reaches 40 trillion, New Hampshire shall peacefully declare independence from the United States. This legislation will be submitted and placed on a ballot for qualified voters at the general state election in November 2024. The wording of the question put to the qualified voters shall be placed in a yes or no answer context. If the proposed amendment is approved by 2/3 of those voting on the amendment, it becomes effective when the governor proclaims its adoption. With the current national debt at 34 trillion and its projection to rise, it can't go anywhere but up at this point. This legislation addresses concerns about future financial standings and the relationship between state and federal governments. This legislation does not call for New Hampshire's immediate secession from the United States, prompt a vote on New Hampshire independence in the general state election in November 2024, or change status of New Hampshire as a state within the United States. Well, there's plenty of people who want to testify, so I'll kind of limit my testimony. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now concerning why this was put forward. But in general, my feeling is that this country is on a course that's unsustainable and dangerous to the values and the liberties that New Hampshire holds sacred. So, hence this being brought forward.
Thank you, Representative. I do have one question that I will ask of you. It's the same question. We had last term, we had a similar secession type measure that came to this committee. I was vice chair at the time, and I'm going to repeat the same question to you that I asked the prime sponsor of that measure. And that has to do with the Pledge of Allegiance, which refers to one nation, indivisible. So I have to assume, and I'm repeating the question I asked last time, that you do not believe in or do not say the Pledge of Allegiance because of the indivisible part of the pledge?
I actually don't say the Pledge of Allegiance because I believe we can only serve one master, and my master is not government. So that's kind of how I feel about the situation in general. I believe that you should worship the Creator and not the creation. So that's how I go about it myself personally.
Thank you. And one follow-up, and this is the same follow-up I asked the introducer last term, and that has to do with some history. And then we all go through the Hall of Flags at the State House. Mm-hmm. The regimental colors from the Civil War. Over 4,000 New Hampshire men died during the Civil War. Countless thousands others injured, wounded. So these people, these soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice because they believed that this nation, as Lincoln said, should be indivisible. So my question is, how do you reconcile this measure with the sacrifices of these men and these in the Hall of Flags, the regimental colors? Some of them are bloodstained. So if you could just help us understand how you reconcile that.
Sure. This is something I was going to bring up in my testimony, but I decided not to, but now I will. growing up, just this is going somewhere, so just follow me a second. Growing up, I was a freshman when 9/11 happened in high school. And I remember that the whole thing was about we got to keep people that we don't know where they're coming from out of this country because we got to secure our borders and et cetera, et cetera. And now we see the border is completely wide open. There is no even pretense of preventing any so-called terrorists from entering the country. I just feel that the the liberties that those men died for are not being upheld today, including the actual defense of our borders. So my point being is that the country that they died for is not actually in existence right now. All of our constitutional amendments are being trampled at every level. I think Edward Snowden kind of proved that pretty explicitly. So we're kind of in this weird ersatz nation status where we don't actually have the liberties that we supposedly do on paper. And that's what I'm concerned about. So those men died for something, yes, but did they die for what we have right now? A federal government that tramples on every single one of our rights? That's my concern. Those men died, yes, but what did they die for? Did they die for what we see right now happening? A currency that is completely worthless and increasingly so every day. A country that's involved in wars all over the place. I think we just started launching an attack on Yemen. I saw on Twitter briefly this morning. I can't even keep up. So that's what I'm concerned about. Those men died for the benefit of the people that live within this country and their posterity, and we don't see that. I mean, look at Concord. We got all these homeless. We got roving bands of homeless people. So that's what I'm really concerned about is the actual people who live in this country and who fight for this country, including the veterans, of which 6,000 commit suicide every day. They're not being supported by the very government that we are told we have to pledge allegiance to. They're not pledging allegiance to us. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I kind of meandered a little bit, but that's what happens when you don't have prepared remarks. So.
Thank you, Representative. That helps. And I think the suicide rate is not 6,000 a day.
Year. I'm sorry. I said year.
Okay, that sounds right. Okay, because that's something that this committee does pay attention to. Thank you for that. Other questions for Representative Filio? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative. In 1869, the Supreme Court in Texas versus White ruled that attempts at secession were, quote, absolutely null, and that the United States is indivisible. That Supreme Court case has never been overruled. Given that, in what way is the present measure constitutional under Texas versus White?
Well, I would first 3 points to that. One, I don't really think 9 men in black dresses has any say on our liberty. Second, I believe the Declaration of Independence holds weight. And third, Article 10 of the state constitution and Article 7, state sovereignty. But Article 10, right to revolution, I don't think that some federal bureaucrats could determine that our state constitution is null and void, of which Article 7 and 10 I would reference you to primarily.
Representative Finney.
Thank you for letting me ask this question. In your belief, you would believe Congress is too far gone, but if we could have had an Article 5 convention to propose an amendment to rein in fiscal spending, could we maybe put more of the defenses in the Constitution against the federal government than just saying that we're going to leave the Union and then that's it?
I don't believe at this time that's actually possible. The corruption has reached such a level, it's actually hard to fathom. The numbers are so huge. So, for instance, on September 10th, 2001, a lot of people don't realize, Donald Rumsfeld, our illustrious previous Secretary of Defense, he announced that I believe it was something in the line of $2.1 trillion was unaccounted for in their audit, and the Pentagon has never actually passed an audit. So, I mean, that's just one example, but I do think the military-industrial complex is a leading cause of our woes. But I think that at this point, there's just such an entrenched, I don't even know if you want to call it deep state, bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it. These people are so far underground, I don't think it's possible to pull them up like turnips. I think we just have to kind of walk away and say, hey, you have obviously some issues with accounting and basic math, And we have some issues with funding an empire at this point. So we got to we need to take care of people in this state. That's what we need to do. That's our primary concern as legislators. That's what, Lisa, that's what I was under the impression of. So I guess that's my answer to that.
Other questions for the prime sponsor, Representative Gagne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. For the sake of argument, suppose this CACR would pass, the people would vote it in by 2/3. So we would separate from the rest of this country. It takes money to be independent, to be your own country. So how, if this thing passes, would we support ourselves? We have an 18-mile coastline. We would have to raise an army for all our borders, et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. So what is your plan for that?
My plan is that I'm a carpenter. I hit nails with a hammer. I am not one to speak on larger issues as far as how we would organize ourselves, but I believe that within this state we have a lot of intelligent people who could figure that out. And quite frankly, I mean, if you want a personal example, I would say that as far as money goes, we have to actually start getting back to real money. So this is a project where they found a way to print gold on the plastic. So it's a thousandth of an ounce. It's worth $4. But the point being is we need to kind of go back to reality. And the fact of the matter is the dollars that they're printing are completely worthless. And the only reason anybody accepts them is because it's the petrodollar. That oil is purchased in dollars. That's the only reason it has any worth. Does it make any sense? So it's not a matter of money. We have plenty of wealth. We simply need to separate ourselves from the extortion racket that is the IRS and keeping our money here. I believe we could entirely support ourselves. Oh, one last thing I want to mention, just it ties in. Texas is putting secession on their Republican primary ballot this year. And I forget the percentages, but somebody else will definitely mention this. So this is not just a New Hampshire thing where we're going to have to support ourselves on maple syrup sales. There is a movement throughout the country to regulate and bring back the federal government under the chains of the Constitution, as the founders termed it.
Other questions? Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I hear you right, you're thinking that perhaps we have a revolution, possible revolution on the horizon. Would my assessment be correct on that or not?
I would say that we're already in the early stages of revolution with a major invasion occurring daily. But on top of that, we have Article 10 in the state constitution, the right to revolution. So I would say that the men who created our constitution foresaw a time when the people of New Hampshire may have to peacefully remove themselves from an entity that was trying to tyrannize them.
Other questions? Seeing none for the prime sponsor. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you very much.
Representative Granger has submitted a card. He opposes the bill. He's asked for 2 minutes. Representative Granger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michael Granger. I'm here representing Stratford District 2. Glenn Bailey back there, he's in the same district as me, and that's Rochester Ward 5, Milton and Milton Mills. And it's been said that a bill is just a conversation until it actually gets signed. So hopefully my contribution to this conversation will be useful and hopefully convince anyone who supports secession that it is not exactly the panacea they think it is. Representative Gerhard mentioned that we need to get back to reality. I am a strong believer that you must deal with reality on reality's terms. In fact, I consider it the bedrock of sanity. If you do not deal with reality on reality's terms, then you're not going to be doing very well in anything you attempt to do in life. So in pursuit of reality, I'd like to point out that the United States is a democratic republic. Whether people want it to be a democratic republic, whether they have principles that are above and beyond a democratic republic, it just is what it is. It currently is a democratic republic. The democracy part is where we vote for representatives. So all of us were elected by democratic means. The republic part is where we're supposedly constrained by a constitution. We try. We don't stick to it very well, but it's supposed to be constrained. Democracy is such an old idea that people often forget why it was invented in the first place back in Athens, because Athens is remembered for two things: inventing democracy and democratically voting to have Socrates kill himself. That's what it was there for. And it wasn't until a republic was introduced to the mix that a little bit more sanity was sort of introduced to to the governance scenario from democracy. But what democracy really was supposed to solve, the problem that it was supposed to solve, was that you had these empires and these great personalities that were constantly battling over who gets to tell everyone what to do, who gets to rule. And they noticed something. Whoever has the bigger army has a tendency to win. So they thought, well, why don't we just skip the whole war part and just count how many soldiers you have, we count how many soldiers we have, and then we agreed from there. And democracy was born. It isn't always a perfect representation of who would actually win the battle, but it's generally a pretty good litmus. So let's go to why having a secession happen at the state level is a bad idea. All right, let's assume 100% of New Hampshire residents vote in favor of secession. The United States population is over 300 million. The population of New Hampshire is a little less than 1.5 million. Therefore, the democratic process, if we have it in New Hampshire, is not a proxy for the war. It's only a proxy for war if all the people on the battlefield are voting. And if they're not voting, then it's not going to represent what would actually end up happening. Therefore, we'd lose. And you guys have heard me speak on Defend the Guard in the past. I'm a very, very anti-war person. I don't want to deal with a war, especially in my backyard. I also don't want to deal with having to go through a DHS checkpoint every time I go to church because my church is in Maine. It's across a bridge. I live on the Salmon Falls River. I cross the river and then I can go to church. I don't want to go through a DHS checkpoint. I don't even like flying airplanes because I don't want to ride with the TSA. I don't want to deal with the TSA. So as I agree with a lot of the principles of the people who are supporting secession. On the point of the Constitution, the founding of the United States is through the Declaration of Independence. We can appeal directly to the people if we disagree with the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution, but I don't think we really should in this case because I don't think that that's a really good idea. Ultimately, as much as I agree with a lot of the principles and ideals of the secessionists, it just doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Will you take questions if there are any?
Sure.
Are there any questions? Representative Finney?
I just have one. Thank you. How do you think that we should deal with, not just in New Hampshire, but as a country, with the issue of our debt? It is our biggest, security issue, but overall, it will collapse eventually. We will go through the worst economic times in history. How do we either prepare for that or deal with the reality of that impending doom, I guess?
So I actually have testimony that I prepared in this room, but for a completely different committee for another bill. I am going to be speaking on two different gold bills this year. One of them was a bill to create a state depository and have some sort of gold-backed currency, which is authorized in the Constitution explicitly by saying that states can actually mint their own gold money and all that jazz, which is an interesting concept. And then I also have one in my own committee, which is in the Labor Committee, to allow gold and silver for the payment of wages. And I believe that when it comes to the reserve currency status that the United States has, we have to look at history on this. A typical world reserve currency lasts 80 to 110 years. That has been a pattern that has emerged since the 1400s. Every reserve currency since the 1400s has lasted between 80 and 110 years. We're due. Now, on the other, one thing you got to realize is currency collapses of world reserve currencies happen fairly regularly. The last time it happened was the British pound sterling. And in World War II, that was the final death knell. It was already not doing very well since World War I. But when the pound sterling eventually really did die, it was in 1944. And they had to start backing their currency instead of in gold, because they didn't have any gold anymore. They started backing their currency in dollars, and that's how America became the world reserve currency in the first place. Now, I believe that the actual mechanism whereby a world reserve currency dies is that it takes a certain amount of time for the generation that made that currency great to die due to their own natural causes, and for us to have a generation in charge of that currency that doesn't understand the fundamentals. And I believe we're at that point, and I don't believe secession is the cure, because it's not like if the dollar dies, we're going to, if we secede, we're better. We need to have a better look at the actual fundamentals, and we need to prepare for the shock that is going to come when the dollar dies.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Granger.
Thank you very much.
I hear you about TSA. I've signed up for pre-screening. I'd recommend you taking a look at that as well. Pam Ian is in the House, a friend from Concord. Pam has submitted, by the way, thank you for the written testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm not going to read that document to you guys. I did submit it because I was told that you would rather hear about personal things, how the federal government has come down on me for certain things. But being a constitutionalist, I couldn't resist not pointing out where the government over the years, since the 20th century, has violated that Constitution. And I know some of you probably don't like this amendment that was put forth, but I really hope that you'll read what I have to say. Excuse me. Because these are things that have happened over the year, and it's almost like the proverbial frog in the lukewarm water. You slowly heat it up, and after a while, the frog is going to die. And I think that's what's happened to us, is that over the years, these things have happened, and not enough people have come forward and said, hey, you can't do that. Or the Supreme Court has ruled erroneously, and we've seen this many times where the Supreme Court decisions were wrong. But anyway, my name is Pamela Ian. I'm a resident of Concord, and I strongly support this referendum. This is something that needs to be on the table. We have to let the federal government know that it has gone too far and has overstepped its bounds in many areas. And if you see, once you read my document, you'll see that many of these things happened years ago. I'm not even talking about things that have happened since Obama or Trump was in office. I've provided each of you with a handout that explains how the government has violated the Constitution over the years. The Constitution is the compact between the people and the government. And when that document is violated, government has become arbitrary. And that's not what our founders wanted for us. So now I'll tell you about the personal story. I was a public school teacher for about 23 years in this state. And after about 10 years, the teachers union informed me that they would start charging me an agency fee, which came out to about $400, even though I was not a member of the union. Authorization for this came from federal collective bargaining rules and a Supreme Court decision in 1977, Abood versus the Detroit Board of Education, which allowed public employers to require non-union members in union-represented bargaining units to pay an agency fee, also known as fair share. I fought against this, and I did win on religious grounds. Instead of my $400 going to the union, I could give it to a charity, and that was what I was told I had to do. So I chose St. Vincent de Paul. I'm religious, I go to church. St. Vincent de Paul is something that my parish participates in. Now, St. Vincent de Paul is an organization that feeds the poor and those on the edge of poverty. I was told by the union lawyer that this was unconstitutional for me to give my money to a religious organization. Now, I hope you see the absurdity in that. I won on the grounds of being a religious person, and yet I was told, oh, you can't give your money to a religious organization. He said it was unconstitutional. It's not. Once you read my document, you'll see what the founders meant by the First Amendment, freedom of religion. Okay, so once the Janus decision came along in 2018, it became a moot point. Anyone who belonged to a public union was no longer required to pay this agency fee. However, there's still private organizations, unions that are taking money from people. And what I find strange about that is when I did testify in favor of right to work, one of the state reps asked me, said, well, you are covered by the union, by law, by federal law. If something happened, if I did something wrong, they would support me. And I said, well, first of all, I think that's absurd because I'm not a union member. So there's the first wrong. Then the second wrong is that they could take my money even though I was not part of the union. So as you can see, this is absurd. You know, two wrongs don't make a right. Now, in conclusion, it's imperative to understand that by supporting CACR 20, you are not saying that you support independence from the United States, but rather that you are giving the voters the right to decide if it's something that they would support or not. Please remember that this bill is not about Trump or Biden. In fact, all of the things that I pointed out in here happened before they were ever president. In fact, some of them happened before they were even born. And this is not a Republican versus Democrat thing anyway. We're all Americans, and all of our freedoms are being taken away by the federal government. And the fact that our founders' vision of peace, prosperity, and freedom have come under attack should influence all of us and should get up our anger about it, because we're losing what our founders had in mind for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you for the written testimony. Much appreciated. If there are no pressing questions, we will press on. Thank you again. I'm looking next at Carla Gorky, who I recognize up front. She's asked for 3+ minutes. Carla, welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and the committee. Thanks for having me here. My name is Carla Garrick. I'm the chairwoman and president emeritus of the Free State Project, a movement that is concentrating tens of thousands of liberty lovers in the state of New Hampshire. I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen. I'm originally from South Africa, and I'm an author, activist, and attorney. I was the Republican nominee for the New Hampshire Senate in District 20, and I received 46% of the vote in 2020 as an open secessionist. And in 2022, I ran for the New Hampshire State House in Ward 11 in Manchester, where I live, and I lost by about 200 votes. I'm pointing that out just to let you guys know this idea might be a little more popular than you assume. I'm a proud Granite Stater because I chose New Hampshire as my forever home about 15 years ago when I moved here. And I moved here for the live free or die ethos that we all love and respect. I'm testifying today in support of CACR 20, which is similar to last year's CACR 32. That was the original independence bill that we put forth, and we tried to listen to the feedback we heard back, and that is the reason we brought this bill back with a qualifying event. What is that qualifying event? It is saying if our national debt becomes $40 trillion, then maybe we need to do something about it. Now, I want us to stand still with the number of trillions, because I'm not sure if anyone even fully grasps and understands what is going on economically. And the way I would like to explain it is by explaining numbers through time. So, 1 million seconds is 11.5 days. 1 billion seconds is 32 days. And 1 trillion seconds is 31,000 years. So again, when the jump went from billions to trillions and we all just kind of rolled with that, we have to realize when we are talking about the debt and we are talking about trillions of dollars, this is not surmountable. We have to do something. The federal government has, am I too loud? Was that what you were saying? Oh, sorry, Larry. I can't hear from here, sorry. The federal government has failed us. It no longer follows the Constitution. It ushers in unconstitutional wars, undeclared wars. It ushers in inflation. It's devalued our money by almost 100%. If you feel like you are getting poorer, you are. If you feel like you cannot get ahead in life anymore, and you know, all of us here are maybe on the older side, but talk to the young people and realize we have to do something. We are getting poorer, and the fault lies squarely with the federal government's monetary policies. I would also like to point out we all lived through COVID mania. And if anyone thinks what happened over the past 3 years is an acceptable way for us to be governed, then I think we should look at that as well. Granite staters are, frankly, we're being abused by the federal government. And what do we advise people when they're being abused to do? We say, leave your abuser. The last time I spoke on this issue here, I talked a little bit about national divorce. Since then, that's actually a topic that is starting to come up. You see it trending. You see Congress people talking about it. I want you to understand the people who support national divorce do not support civil war, because the thing that you're now seeing trend is people are talking about national divorce, and then the next thing you see is people are talking about war in the same way the question immediately came up. We do not support violence. In fact, we are here today and we continue to work on this issue because violence is the tool of tyrants. It is the tool of authoritarians, and it's the tool of control freaks. In other words, it's the tool of the federal government and bad people who support killing other people because you disagree with us. Instead of telling us you'll punch us in the face or leave us to rot in a basement when we try to leave, we should start to have this open and honest conversation about what actually needs to take place. We have the right to ask for a divorce. This is all today's proposed bill does. It says it gives us, granite staters, the democratic opportunity to decide if we want to stay with the sinking ship of the federal government and its $40 trillion of federal debt, or if we can do better as granite staters. I believe we can do better on our own. So abusers will tell you you're not allowed to leave. They'll tell you, hey, we'll change. Maybe like if you put in some bells and whistles, we'll start to listen to the Constitution. They might even tell you it's your fault. But we all know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. It is insane for us to continue to trust our government. It's creating debt. Imagine if you ran your household the way they're running the government. I mean, it's absurd. As our elected officials, it's your duty to create the opportunity for granite staters to make this decision for themselves. You guys don't really have the right to be the gatekeeper on this. All you should do is say, I don't know, maybe we should leave it up to the voters of New Hampshire and let us decide our own destiny. We have the right enshrined in the New Hampshire Constitution, as has been mentioned here, both Article 7 and Article 10, to make those decisions. And again, clearly, we're not here because we want to revolt, even though that right exists. We are here because we're trying to solve a problem before it gets worse. Today, your duty is to support democracy. If you've tweeted the word democracy ever, if you've written about it, if you've mentioned it, then this is your democratic duty, is to put the question to the voters of the Granite State. We're called the live free or die state. When we become independent, we will be the live free and thrive state. And the questions that we have about what it would look like, how it would work, we're trying to address that too. HB 1130, which is coming up later, is a study committee to start to talk about those questions. But I advise everyone, let's not think in a limited, boxed way. Let's think with a growth mindset and let's not have limiting beliefs. I can assure you that if New Hampshire was independent, we'd be a cool little country and we could make it work. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions at this time? Representative Massimillo.
Thank you for taking my question. Would you be in favor of an Article 5 convention which could address the national debt?
I mean, yes, I'm actually in favor of anything where we're all talking and we're actually trying to come up with solutions. So I'm not against that, sure.
Other questions? Thank you, Carla, for that passionate testimony.
Apparently loud as well, sorry.
I have trouble hearing sometimes, but I could hear you, and I appreciate that.
Good morning, Chairman Moffat and members of the committee. My name is Matt Saborn DeChouanier. I'm the chairman of the New Hampshire Independence Political Action Committee. We support legislators and help draft legislation related to the idea of New Hampshire as an independent country. For the past 2 years in a row, the St. Anselm poll has registered the federal government receiving a 75% disapproval rating in New Hampshire, and we'll see what this spring's poll will say. We share the same feelings of dissatisfaction and uncertainty that many Granite Staters feel regarding the future of the United States. For Granite Staters who have lost confidence in D.C., we are proposing another option. We advocate for peaceful secession in the form of this year's CACR 20 with a qualifier of $40 trillion in debt if we hit it. The current federal debt to GDP ratio is 122.29%, and we believe New Hampshire can do better than this. While there's no standard international legal precedence for whether a seceding state is required to accept its portion of the federal debt when departing from its parent state, it would be smart to plan for a course of action that anticipates accepting our portion of the national debt. In the apportionment of public debt and assets during state secession by academic Daniel Blum, published in Case Western Reserve Journal of International Law, provides theories how debt could be shared. If we were to use New Hampshire's per capita allocation, which is around $170,000 per citizen, or its percentage of the national or the total GDP, which is 0.43%, as a measuring stick to determining New Hampshire's portion, it comes to an upper limit of $172 billion. I know Carla was talking about time earlier. If we were to allocate the total tax burden that was paid to the federal government in 2022, made that an annual payment to any debt that we accrued following secession, it could be paid off in just over a decade. It's just a thought. 2024 is not the first time Americans living in New England explored leaving the Union. New Hampshire, or New England states, considered seceding in 1803 over disputes with the Louisiana Purchase, and in 1814 over disputes with the War of 1812. In 1842, former President of the United States John Quincy Adams brought a petition signed by 46 residents of Haverhill, Massachusetts, advocating for the dissolution of the Union on the House floor in U.S. Conference on an account of the federal government's support of slavery. There is historical precedence for the deliberations we are bringing forth today. This month, we do have politicians touring the state, giving us ideas of the future and what might be, inspiring hope in some. However, we've seen this play out year after year. The political situation in the country has only worsened in my lifetime. I do not anticipate it improving. Following peaceful secession, we'd love to have great relationships with our New England and Canadian neighbors, and even the United States as well. We encourage the members of the committee to vote in favor of the resolution so that people in New Hampshire may be given the chance to express their position on the matter.
Representative Glenn Bailey is asked for a couple of minutes, and Representative Bailey is in the House. Welcome, Representative Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and esteemed committee members. I would preface it by saying a few years ago I attended a civil case of a landowner versus one of the towns. It was here in Concord, I believe, the trial. And the person was representing themselves pro se. And they expressed everything in terms of the New Hampshire Constitution. And at every step in like an hour trial, the judge would take whatever the defendant said, or the plaintiff or whatever, and translate it into the U.S. Constitution. You know, everything. And this is in a New Hampshire court overseen by a New Hampshire judge appointed under the New Hampshire Constitution, had little interest in the New Hampshire Constitution. It was all being translated to the U.S. Constitution. So several years later, I attended the debates of this prior term, this same issue on the prior term, and there was a PI that asked, are we a sovereign state or just the district office of D.C.? Well, by what I saw in that courtroom, I'd say we were just the district office for D.C., which you can take that as you like. One of the speeches said that this was all settled by the Civil War, as if we were a conquered people or something. I didn't quite get that, but most of the people around here fought against the seceding states, you know, but somehow or other we can never think of that, we can never do that because we're like a conquered people. I don't believe we are. We've seen positive examples of this in the British pulled out of the European Union in Brexit. I've lived through several Quebec independence votes and Puerto Rico independence votes, and there's countries around the world that have successfully and peacefully withdrawn from their larger unit. I believe we could do the same, but there's the countervailing thing that there's places that are conquered. Like to take this representative that was speaking and said it was settled by the Civil War. If Putin manages to crush Ukraine, will we all regard that as settled? It could never be brought up again? Or by the same token, if the Chinese stomp into Taiwan, will we and successfully oppress them, will we regard that as settled? I don't believe that this is settled by the Civil War. We retain the right to pull out if we want. It's voluntary. As far as the dollar goes, I mean, usually by this point, the International Monetary Fund has been called in to save whatever country is in the fix we're in. Of course, we're funding most of that. But, and I believe one of the prior witnesses said we're at 129% of GDP to debt to GDP. They usually say that when the debt equals GDP, you will never be able to pay it off. You're already done. You're doomed. It's just a question of when it fails. But that ratio is impossible to ever pay off, despite what they say. And I don't mean to pick on the current administration. It's been going on for years in a bipartisan way. We're constantly being asked to this at the county and the state and even the town level to take federal money as grants. Well, you know, they print it in the basement. They have no money. They're for $34 trillion in debt. It's magic, you know. It's not really accomplishing anything. And just digging, I'm old, but the younger people I see around me, we're digging them into debt from which we will never recover. So I would be in favor of at least asking the people around me, would you like to get out of this mess peacefully? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for the well-articulated testimony. Are there any pressing questions for the representative? Thank you again. Seeing none, we will go on to Bonnie Freeman from Keene has asked for a minute. Bonnie, are you in the house?
My name is Bonnie Freeman, and I heard somebody else say that you asked specifically for personal reasons why we support this bill. And I would like to say that as a kid, I was a military brat. My dad and my mom met in the Army, and my dad was in the military for the entire time I was a child till I moved out of the house. And every day, watching him get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, work all day, and I constantly had to hear him say things like, I just can't get ahead. I don't have the ability to have savings. I just can't get ahead. And he is supposedly serving our country. People think that, some people who would have no idea, think that military members make like a whole bunch of money, and they really don't. And my mom had to take care of the kids, and there were 7 of us. Well, I then graduated high school, and I wasn't a rich person. I didn't go to college. I just started working. And I found myself talking exactly like my dad did my whole life. I just can't catch a break. I can't get ahead. How is it possible that this costs this much, and how is it possible I don't have any money left to put in savings? Well, when I found out what inflation was, that the government had created this invisible hidden tax that was stealing the purchasing power of my money, I was so mad, and I didn't even know what I could possibly do about it. I lived in Utah at the time, and I thought, well, I'll move to Texas because I'm pretty sure that's the freest state. And while I was there, the government closed down everything entertaining in your life or anything that made your life purposeful, and I had to walk past cops to go into Walmart and stuff during COVID. Well, my point is, I heard about New Hampshire being much freer, came up here, and there's a large group of people who really care about personal freedoms here, and I'm happy to be a part of that movement. Well, I think that New Hampshire shouldn't be a part of the federal government because it's part of what has done all this terrible stuff to everyone I know who's a hardworking person, stealing, since COVID began, 50% of our purchasing power. The dollar still looks the same, but the dollar buys 50% less of what it did since COVID started because the federal government printed that much money. And it's just not fair. The federal government also rated...
But Bonnie, thank you. The comments you just made on the money and the currency we've heard before, and you did ask for a minute. We have 4 more cards, and we want to give everybody a shot at speaking to this. And so if you could conclude your comments, which we really appreciate, but we want to give the other folks a chance too before we finish up. So continue.
Okay, well, all I was going to say was the federal government also raided my house, and I don't appreciate them holding guns at my face while I'm naked and forced me to put my dog in a pile of glass and put boots on that had glass filled in them and tried to make me go outside naked in 10-degree weather, and all because my boyfriend didn't fill out a piece of paper. And if you want to learn more about that, it's thecrypto6.com. It's absolutely ridiculous that everybody in Keene, New Hampshire voted against having these Bearcats, and the federal government said, this guy didn't fill out a paperwork before selling Bitcoin, so we're going to go do that to their house with Bearcats. I don't like them. I don't want to live under their rule.
Thank you, Bonnie. Could you repeat the .com that you said before?
The what did you say?
You mentioned a website or something. Could you repeat that slower for those that are watching at home? Yeah.
It's the crypto, as in cryptocurrency, 6.com.
Thank you for that. Russell from Winchester. Russell Canning. Russell.
So I'll keep it short too. Hopefully nobody's brought this up. I, of course, also have a problem. My friend got thrown in jail. If the feds weren't involved, he wouldn't be in jail, Ian Freeman. As a Christian, I'm not supposed to kill my enemies. I'm supposed to love my enemies. I don't even come close to that, but I try not to kill them. The federal government kills people. They kill people in Afghanistan. They kill people in Syria. They fund people that kill people. No matter who we send as representatives from New Hampshire to Washington, D.C., they will continue killing people. Even if we sent the most wonderful House of Representatives guys and senators, they can just be outvoted. I want us to leave so we can stop being at war.
Okay, we have 3 more cards here. We're going to go to Christopher Wade. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you. So my name is Christopher Wade. I am from Keene. All right. So New Hampshire declared independence from the British Empire, and that was also illegal, I want to point out. New Hampshire led independence for the Americas, in fact, and it can do it again. If you recognize the United States or New Hampshire's prior declaration from Great Britain, you must accept it would be hypocritical to not also recognize our right to declare it again against the American Empire. There is a difference between what is moral and right and what the law says. We should do what is moral and right, not blindly do what the law says. Our veterans didn't fight to maintain a nation, but they did fight for liberty and freedom. Fear of war is a poor reason not to declare independence. New Hampshire is not the one who would be declaring war, and this would not make sense. After all, we're a very small population. We may be invaded over our Declaration of Independence, and it might make sense to fight back, but that is a poor reason to not declare independence. There's also a possibility a war with New Hampshire doesn't unfold at all. It's a very unpopular, right now, it's a very unpopular to go to war with any state that would break away. That's according to surveys, the most recent surveys done in regards to states declaring independence from the United States. So basically, any president that were to declare war on New Hampshire, if it were to declare independence, would be very, very unpopular, and most of the population of the United States would be against it. The question is, why independence, though? It no longer serves our interests of our population to continue in a union with the United States. Besides the obvious wars and other bad decisions, I want to talk about one reason we should go our own way. The U.S. Supreme Court in South Dakota versus Wayfair ruled that New Hampshire businesses have to collect sales tax on behalf of other states. We don't even have to collect sales tax for our own state. Why should we have to declare or collect sales tax for other states? This isn't the case for Canadian businesses, putting us at a disadvantage. The highest law of the land applies to states, not other countries. This is one good reason to declare independence. There are over 10,000 taxing jurisdictions, and each has its own set of tax laws. It's fiscally infeasible and costly to figure out the taxes for each order a company ships. That's what Wayfair did. There is not a single business in compliance with this ruling. There are wrongly collected amounts because, unlike a single business in a single location complying with a single set of tax laws, the tax laws you must comply with as a business are dependent on the receiver's location. Not even Europe has a tax system this insane. We can't fix this and other bad decisions without exiting the Union. This is just one of thousands of bad laws, the Supreme Court rulings we can't fix without declaring independence. New Hampshire isn't declaring war on the United States. It's declaring independence from a union that no longer represents our interests. Another example of why New Hampshire is poorer than it should be is hidden federal taxation. Besides property taxes, federal income taxes, and other federal taxes you see removed from your paycheck or on your pay stub, there's also other taxes like tariffs. For example, I paid 25% tariff to receive some 4G USB modems for my business that we sell. And as a rough estimate of what that's taking out of your paycheck or out of your income, that's about 13% if you're talking about goods across. There's not tariffs on every good, but that's about 13% if you look at all of Walmart, all the goods in Walmart, it's about 13%. They're basically the federal government's getting from you in a form of a tax, a hidden tax. And those are called tariffs. Some estimates put the amount stolen by government through these means and other regulations at 90%. So think about that, almost double your income. No matter what we lose from federal bribes, they can be made up through local means, whether it's taxes or other systems of fundraising.
Okay, Christopher, we've heard a lot of the numbers material before, and I know you're reading some testimony, and we're running a little behind. You're a little bit over. So
I'm done, so.
Oh, okay. That was a good finish. Are there any pressing questions for Christopher? As we're going to finish up, Ahmed Esfahani. He'll tell me if I said that correctly. If he's here from Alstead. If you could state your name for the clerk, and your writing is very good. That's what she really appreciates.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Ahmad Esfahani. I live in Alstead. I'm also employed by the town of Alstead. I'm the administrator to the zoning board and planning board. I'm employed by the town of Walpole. I'm the recording secretary, and I also serve as secretary for the Fall Mountain Regional School District Budget Committee. The first thing I wanted to talk about was an article that was published in 2007 in the Journal of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. The title of this article was Homeland Security and Community Policing, Competing or Complementing Public Safety Policies. This article was co-authored by two different people. The first was Dr. Robert Friedman. Dr. Robert Friedman is the founding director of the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange. This program has police chiefs and assistant chiefs and high-ranking officers throughout the nation spend time in Israel working with their police force. And to summarize, they essentially learn how to police in a system of apartheid, a us and them type of society. The other author was a man named William Jordan Cannon, which was my name before I changed it. I have the document of my name change if you need to see that. Dr. Friedman was my mentor, and I learned a lot from him. And I'll summarize the article that I'm mentioning. On one hand, Homeland Security and the Patriot Act create a system where there was an us and them society as far as policing and public safety goes. This is the opposite of what community policing does. Community policing engages the community. It works within, it does not see criminals or people who are, engaging in any type of behavior as the other. What I believe that the people here who are in support of secession, which I agree with many of their sentiments, all the statements about the present state of the federal government, I'm in agreement with, but I think that their thoughts of secession is similar to grasping at a phantom limb, because there is an idea of America that I think we all have that is no longer in practice. Now, whether this was negated by the Patriot Act or if it was negated by the recent COVID legislation, I don't know. But with the COVID legislation and all the things that happened there, we ended up with a society, again, of two different masked people, unmasked people, vaccinated people, unvaccinated people. And as we all can probably agree upon, a house divided cannot stand. And that's what I think is going to happen. So what I did after the hearing in 2022, CACR 32, is I went and visited various select boards up and down the Connecticut River and discussed something that I created called the Connecticut River 8 Project. This is not a revolutionary idea. This is not a secession idea. This is something to do once the collapse happens, because most people are going to go along with whatever is in place until it ceases to function, or at least that is what I believe. The frustrating thing with being on a budget committee for a school district, especially with ESSER funding, I'm not sure if anyone of you are familiar with federal funding for schools during COVID, and now a lot of these positions are going, is when I'm seeing federal money being sent to Ukraine or to Israel or to wherever, and when I see schools lose teachers, it makes me a little bit frustrated and concerned that the people in DC do not care about the people of the United States of America. So I don't think necessarily it is a problem with America, because I travel all around this country. I actually even work in Buckland, Mass. as a boards clerk. I think probably the problem is Washington, D.C. and all the alphabet organizations that exist there. So what I would ask everyone here to consider is that even though secession would be great, and being from Atlanta, of course, I can talk about that. I think if we see what happened the last time secession, it was a group of people looking to hold on to something that was already gone. The Confederate secession was about holding on to feudalism, where we were moving towards industrialization and technology. And I think what this secession is trying to hold on to a 20th century America that does not exist anymore. And it saddens me that that's the case. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Are there any pressing questions? Yes.
So are you in support or opposition? Are you in support or opposition of this bill, or you take no stand?
You support this measure, correct?
I'm neutral to it,
Okay.
because if I can explain why
We're way over your minutes,
okay,
Ahmed,
understood. Thank you.
And I want to honor the other folks who've come here, and so
course.
we'll mark you down as neutral. And thank you
Thank you.
for coming here from Alstead, and that was very well-organized testimony. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Elliot, the last card I hear is for Elliot Axelman. Is Elliot here? Elliot, if you have anything new, that's what we want to hear, is new stuff, and you have a couple minutes. Sure.
Well, lucky for me, I didn't hear any of the previous testimony, but I'll try not to repeat everything. I only have like 34 trillion reasons why I want to leave the union, so this might not take you too many more decades to listen to me. There are so many reasons. I think the overarching things, a lot of people touched on the inflation, the other stuff, the wars, all the violations. Just inflation in and of itself is enough reason to want to leave the union. For me, the biggest things are probably the endless wars forcing me. So I have to pay taxes. I pay about a third of my income to federal taxes. And that goes to fighting wars in 180 countries around the world, bombing people. And as we now know, it's not even controversial to say that the federal government, with our taxpayer dollars, is funding both sides of so many wars. They are giving billions to Israel and Gaza, the PA, or Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Like, they're funding both sides. They're funding both sides of other wars, probably Ukraine, probably Russia, probably other sides of Middle Eastern countries. So they're funding both sides and with our taxpayer dollars. But the biggest things for me is we have not had a chance, so people in this room alive today have not had a chance to vote on whether we want to stay in this relationship with the DC politicians in like 250 years. So even if in some universe in which our ancestors, we had a direct lineage to Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, which most of us don't, but even if we had direct lineage, what we have is our ancestors 250 years ago, so like 25 generations back, not all of them, but some of them signed onto the Constitution, only like 40 of them, but whatever. But even if all of them signed the Constitution unanimously, all 1 billion American colonists, that still couldn't bind all of us to be in a perpetual relationship with our overlords in DC forever. My son over there, I can't really bind him to anything. I barely have like guardianship over him. But my grandson, I can't bind to anything. I can't sign a contract that any legal system in the universe that I know of would be considered legitimate to bind my son or grandson or great grandson to any kind of contract, especially not being a slave to the people in DC forever. So if you think of it as a marriage, in the modern era, we have unilateral divorce. If one party wants to leave, it takes two. I think the Shays said last time, you can't just leave. It takes two to enter a relationship. It takes two to leave. That's kind of not really how the world works. It takes two to enter a relationship, but one is enough to leave. If my wife wants to divorce me, she could do that. I can't use force. So if we want to leave DC, we shouldn't need DC's consent to do it. We can just leave if we're being abused. So I've written articles. Everyone on the committee knows I've written numerous articles and books and put out a lot of stuff about the reasons. There are hundreds of reasons. I have an article running tally of like 130 reasons why we should secede. I'm happy to give a lot of material to the committee today. I wrote a short book called Articles of Secession that answers all the most common questions. I'd love to debate. I'd love to have a study committee as well. But I'd love to put this on the ballot. And one last thing is, it says 35 trillion, or 40 trillion. That needs to put up like 45, 50 trillion, because we're running out of time. By the time we're done with this bill and we exec it in a few days, maybe the debt will be past 40 trillion maybe. So let's push it up to 50 trillion to give us a bit more time. But I think there are so many reasons, and the people should be allowed to vote on this. We have never had a chance in 250 years to vote on this. And there are so many reasons. I could go on literally forever until I die of old age. So I'll stop it there. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions for Elliot? Elliot, you speak very well. You can fill out a card later. Please have. In your name,
Melissa.
And please take a couple minutes if.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I didn't prepare a speech, but I'm just going to speak from my heart. Our government has been infiltrated a long time ago, and they are just merely puppets. They answer to the elite oligarchs, and they don't serve the American public at all. They don't care about us like other people have said. And they do, I had so much more to say in my head, but I feel under pressure. But the lobbyists, they're bribed, they're blackmailed. They don't serve us any longer. And we are headed towards a dystopian digital future with digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, and social economic score. You can see it coming. You really can see it coming. I don't know, you can even feel it coming. But imagine what we could do if we were to be able to secede. We could create free energy. It has been done, but they hide everything. They don't allow us to do something like that. We could, in fact, Stanley Meyer back in the 70s, I don't know if you remember, but he was on TV and on the news and everything. He was able to create a car that could run on water, and the feds ended up murdering him, got all of his technology and murdered him. There's been healers of cancer and, using frequencies, and they were murdered. So imagine what we could do if we didn't have those kind of restraints. We could really, really succeed very well. There was a lot more I wanted to say, but like I said, I know what time's run out.
Melissa, thank you so much for that. Melissa, we'll look for your card, but your last name?
Economacus, if you could just let the people vote. That's all we ask.
Got it. Thank you again. All right, with that, we will put call a close to that first hearing, which is HB 1130, and that is to establish a commission to study the economic, legal, sociological aspects of New Hampshire exerting its sovereign state rights. The prime sponsor is here. Representative, the seat is now clear for you. Welcome, and talk to us about HB 1130.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. I am Representative Santanastasso, representing the towns of Rindge, Jaffrey, and Dublin. House Bill 1130 establishes a statutory committee to study the economic, legal, and sociological aspects of New Hampshire exerting its sovereign state rights. I chose to introduce this bill this year because I think it's critical that New Hampshire is prepared in the case of a national divorce or similar incident that would drive New Hampshire to chart its independence. You do not need to support New Hampshire independence to support this bill. This bill is about emergency preparedness. In a time when so many political leaders are floating the idea of a national divorce, it is critical that New Hampshire has a sound plan for exiting the United States if that scenario were to occur. Movements in Texas and California are exploring the idea of independence. Gavin Newsom even refers to California as a nation state. We could be one election away from a massive shakeup in the makeup of the United States. In order to prepare for this potential scenario, we need to ask critical questions. While something like a federal dissolution seems unlikely today, I would like to remind the committee that impossible things have often happened throughout history, including the sudden breakup of the Soviet Union. If someone said in 1988 that the Soviet Union would be completely gone in 5 years, they would have been considered a crazy person. And to demonstrate this is a real possibility, it is an open secret that the United States is going to lose its reserve currency status. The economic, social, and political repercussions of this event is unknowable. The study committee would provide a comprehensive analysis of the economic, legal, and sociological aspects of New Hampshire exerting its sovereign state rights. It would allow for an in-depth examination of the implications of a potential independent New Hampshire, including its relationship with the federal government and other states. The committee could identify potential benefits and challenges that an independent New Hampshire may face, such as changes to taxation, trade, and foreign relations. The findings of the committee could inform future legislation and policy decisions regarding New Hampshire's relationship with the federal government. A study committee would promote civic engagement by encouraging public input and a discussion on this uniquely interesting topic. It would raise awareness about the issue of state sovereignty and how it affects the lives of New Hampshire residents. The study committee could serve as a model for other states considering similar issues. The work of the study committee could lead to a better understanding of the role of states in the federal system and potentially strengthens New Hampshire's position within the Union. New Hampshire will be more prepared for a situation that causes an independent New Hampshire. Talks of independence in general, I think, helps the state when bargaining with the federal government. A lot of people who would not support CACR 32 of 2022, the previous independence bill, even though they didn't support the bill, they understood the grievances with the federal government, and they agreed. Often they agreed with the grievances, but disagreed this is the best method
or that the federal government was just not out of control enough yet. So similar to like how a firearm is a violence deterrent, a criminal won't attack because the gun is perceived as a threat. True independence talks is a good tyranny deterrent because the federal government will just let off the gas a little bit if they fear the real possibility of states breaking away. House Bill 1130 is a forward-thinking initiative that prepares New Hampshire for all eventualities, whether within or outside the Union. By examining the intricate economic, legal, and sociological aspects of asserting our state sovereign rights, this bill not only equips us with valuable insights for potential independence, but also strengthens our position with the federal government. This proactive approach ensures New Hampshire remains prepared and resilient in the face of an unpredictable future, while fostering a deeper understanding of our state's role within the federal system. Thank you for your time, and I will take questions from the committee.
Thank you, Representative. I have one quick thing. You mentioned several times study committee. You meant study commission, I think, right? Study commission as opposed to committee.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you for the correction.
And I know that commissions, that there are some protocols for certain ways to put commissions together. The previous measure we just heard called for a commission as well. And looking at that measure, some of the commission members, we're going to have to check with parliamentarians to see if it fits the model or the protocols for a commission. So I'm looking on your first page, 3 members of the House, et cetera. So I'm just asking, so is the makeup of your commission, is this in accordance with the protocols for commissions? Is that, have you confirmed all that?
I can't confirm that this time.
Okay, or we will. Okay, that was my question, just on the makeup and the protocols. Other questions for the prime sponsor? All right, thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
We have some pink cards here. We're going to dive right in. We're going to go through these hopefully expeditiously. As I've said before, please submit written testimony. And again, we request that you don't repeat previous information so that we can get right through this. Russell Canning from Winchester. Is Russell here? Russell, welcome again. You've asked for 1 minute, and that's wonderful. Happy to give you a minute.
Yes, because so Russell Canning from Winchester. So I was part of writing this. We do not know how those procedures are for commissions, so that'll have to be handled later. We are going to be able to do something that the Texas National Movement is not able to do right now. We're friends with them. They're trying to, our government here in New Hampshire is more open to the people. So we might be able to do something here that California and other places can't do. We will be the trailblazers, just like we were the trailblazers in the 1700s. So I think one person on this committee 2 years ago asked for a commission, and a few other people that weren't in this committee, they thought CACR 32 was too soon. So that's why we're doing it.
Thank you again. And in terms of other states, I think California might be well advised to see what we're up to here in New Hampshire from time to time. That's just me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They won't be able to talk about it.
And also, the prime sponsor, is he still here? Yeah. So to his point about making sure that the language and the protocols and the commission members fit with whatever the protocols for a commission are, that's something that I'm sure the prime will confirm.
And these kinds of things do not have to lead to secession. Catalonia looked into it, and then it never happened. Of course, there were some abuses on the Spanish side when that happened, but it was good for them. They did a commission. They spent 8 years and a lot of money. In New Hampshire, we won't spend that much money.
A little European history there. Bonnie is still here. Bonnie, do you still wish to testify on this? Okay, Bonnie from Keene was here. Again, we've already spent a lot of time on state sovereignty, but if you have some new points for this measure, take a minute or two for sure. Go ahead.
Okay, I work for a press, I'm a member of the media, and I have interviewed hundreds of people with my husband about secession and asking them what they felt about it. And I mean, only people in New Hampshire too. Overwhelmingly, people are in favor of it, but a lot of them have questions. A lot of them say, I can see why that would be a great idea, but I have questions. And all I want to say is this would be the perfect opportunity to give them solid answers with real data instead of just explaining to them what we think is most likely true. Like Alu Axelman, who testified 2 bills ago, he has a book called Articles of Secession, and it has all kinds of explanations for many of the frequently asked questions, but a commission would give people more concrete answers. That's all.
Thank you, Bonnie. Ms. Freeman, any questions for Bonnie? Seeing none, thank you and good luck with your media career. I see you behind the camera. Matt Chouanier is still in the house. And Matt, you spoke earlier in this general subject, and you have some new points, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep. So, and it's still the morning. So good morning, Chairman Moffat and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having me again today. Matt Sabor and Chouanier. I'm the chairman of the New Hampshire Independence PAC. Excited to have our PAC endorse this legislation. Obviously, the purpose of this bill is to create a plan of action for New Hampshire as its own nation state. Few things. There's a lot going on in the country, and I wanted to illustrate a few things that why we should consider planning ahead should we need to be our own country. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene brought up her support of the idea of national divorce during her speech when she visited the Grafton County Republican Committee's Lincoln and Reagan dinner this past fall. I know she's tweeted about that several times, but it's not just us or Texas talking about that. There's other folks around the country that are doing it as well. California has its own national party. In the Pacific Northwest, the Greater Idaho Movement seeks to relocate several counties in rural Oregon to the state of Idaho. There's even the Divide New York campaign going on. And while not currently legislatively active, our next door neighbor Vermont has its own independence advocacy group. During this current election cycle, there have been scenarios of major party candidates for president of the United States being removed from state ballots. In Texas, they had nearly 140,000 citizens sign a petition for Texas to secede. It's possible it could be on the ballot this spring. I don't know. Additionally, with no predictable end so far to immigration into the United States, the question is, could multiculturalism in America today yield multiple countries in North America tomorrow? Sir John Glubb, in his book, The Fate of Empires, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, guys. In The Fate of Empires, analyzed the current, the cultural success of 13 different states and federations over history, and concluded that the average cycle length of national greatness of an empire is about 250 years. We're approaching the anniversary with these in the United States. These are canaries in the coal mine of national divorce that has granted state leaders we should not ignore. In the beginning of the 1900s, there were 55 states worldwide. What will this century bring? Just like how you and your family have a plan for what to do when the power goes out at home, state government of New Hampshire should have its own plan on how to behave in the event of a national divorce. The questions the bill seeks to answer cover both foreign and domestic policy. This is a scenario that Hampshire should be prepared for. I would love all members of the committee to feel safe and responsible voting in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Matt, your written testimony, is that something that you have already submitted to us or you're going to submit?
It was not for this one, sir, no.
Okay.
It wasn't, yeah.
You mentioned Vermont has a sovereign movement as well. Did I hear you say that?
Like the Vermont Independent, they got a website. Like they were active for like 5 years. They're not as active now. Yeah, they.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Questions for Matt? Seeing none, thank you again for your time and for your interesting testimony, which hopefully we'll get a copy for the clerk's folder.
Good morning, or still morning, barely. Chairman Moffat, committee members. I'm Stephen Valet from Dover, and I'm the founder of the Club 75 Alliance, one of several New Hampshire groups advocating for secession. But my group is very different from the others. I want to do it legally, and that means a United States constitutional amendment to allow secession, modeled after the European Union's Article 50, which made Brexit possible. Now, the politicians in DC aren't going to like this, but they need to remember they're supposed to be representing the American people. And recent polls show that folks are starting to open their minds about secession. I want to reach out directly to the American people and ask them nicely to please be magnanimous and allow negotiated, peaceful secession, because it's the proper decent, civilized thing to do when a clear majority of a state's residents want independence. That's what consent of the governed is all about. My second big difference from the other groups is that I'm happy to wait a few years. I actually think secession today would be premature. We probably don't have the majority in favor yet. In any case, for me, it's not about escaping a broken federal government. I don't think DC is broken. It's just trying to be all things to all people. And we need to get away from that. We need to acknowledge that different people want very different things out of government. Libertarians like me want small government, much smaller than what most Republicans and Democrats want. And we're gradually realizing our best strategy is to concentrate ourselves in New Hampshire until we're the majority here, and then push for peaceful secession. I'm the author of this book, which explains in some detail how it could work. I call it multilateral secession. That means carefully listening to all sides, especially including the loyalists, those folks already here in New Hampshire who remain loyal to DC and who would by that time be a minority. In a civilized secession, it's vitally important to make reasonable accommodations for the loyalists. And in this case, that means grandfathering them into the big government benefits they have today. My goal for secession is to make lots of libertarians very happy while maintaining excellent relations with the United States, and also making sure that nobody in New Hampshire is materially worse off due to secession. If it looks like some people would be suffering, then as part of this study commission, let's sit down, talk about it, and see if we can fix it so that secession doesn't hurt anybody. So please vote ought to pass on this bill so we can have a civil discussion about secession. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Steve. You mentioned the term loyalists, which is a historical term, so this is a different type of loyalist than what we saw in the history books, correct?
It's parallel, though. It means people who remain loyal to the parent country.
Okay, to the existing regime, so to speak.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Valet.
Okay.
Last pink card, Carla Gurecki. Ms. Gurecki spoke very eloquently earlier.
Thank you. I'm the same person I was when I testified earlier, Carla Garrick from Manchester. I'm also the acting president of the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence. I'm here to testify in support of HB 1130. Last year, as many of you know who still serve on the committee, we got a lot of flack. It seemed like the feedback was, hey guys, this seems premature. Do you know what you're doing? What's going on? So we heard that, and so we drafted this in an attempt to try and really come to the table and start to grapple with these difficult ideas, but things that have to be talked about. I think it's fair to say we don't have all the answers yet. And that's okay. We're starting a conversation, and it's worth letting our imaginations soar. Let's say an independent nation, New Hampshire could be a prosperous and peaceful country along the lines of successful countries like Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, or Switzerland. We would have 4 times the population of Iceland. We'd be larger than some countries in Europe. We'd be able to work with our neighbors to trade, much like countries in the Shenzhen area in Europe already do. So that whole question about, oh, would I have to go through border control to go to Maine, to my cabin? No, probably not. It's something we could solve. For people who are concerned about Social Security, we have a lot of expats who already live in places like Mexico who do receive their Social Security checks. We could even grapple with something like a dual citizenship. You could be a citizen of the great country of New Hampshire, and you could hold dual citizenship with the United States. A study committee would give us the opportunity and create a safe space for us to explore these ideas of New Hampshire sovereignty. Maybe we could run on nuclear power. I know there are bills in front of various committees at the moment looking at, hey, could we expand our nuclear? And maybe we could export energy. Maybe we would have competing currencies and we would start to attract banks and, crypto companies and people to come invest in our great little country. Maybe we would actually become the Switzerland of North America. The only thing that is stopping us from becoming more awesome is the federal government that is literally destroying our wealth. A study committee would be a good compromise between the positions we heard this morning and just saying, hey, we're going to stick our heads in the sand and do nothing. I will ask you guys to think about any actual reform that has happened on the federal level in the last 50 years. In fact, the bill we heard on the USS Liberty, that's 56 and a half years, and these people are still trying to solve a problem. So, you know, if we're going to wait, I don't think it's going to do us well. This, we already mentioned the trillions of dollars, the unsustained debt, the fact that the federal government literally does not respect us. And we're basically, I mean, New Hampshire is almost like District 12 in the Hunger Games at this stage. We're just this little outpost where they're leaving us while also claiming things like they own your body and that they can force you to inject yourself with things against your will. I say no. I say no to the federal government. I say it's time for all of us to reclaim our right of conscience and support this bill so that we can start to have the conversation, so that we don't end up in a mass rush or a panic when the time comes. Let's plan. Let's start to have the hard conversations now. Let's grapple with the real risks that everyone in this room knows we are actually facing. If we let the federal government go on, we are looking at more harm, more poverty, and more decline in our standards of living. I know everyone in this room knows we can do better. We demand better. We know there are better options, and it starts with an appetite for change, and it starts here today with all of you. You know, you have to be brave to do radical things that actually improve the lives. That is how this country was born. And I ask all of you here today to be brave, to start to actually address the issues that we know are real. I will leave you guys with the words of my great-grandmother, who was in a British concentration camp in South Africa. No one knows that during the Anglo-Boer War, the Brits had concentration camps, and they killed 25% of all Boer women and children in South Africa. My great-grandmother would say the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Let's plan, let's do it right. Let's show everyone in the world that if you sit down and have the hard conversations, we can come up with solutions that benefit all of us. Thank you.
Representative Levitt has his hand up. Ms. Garek, would you take one question?
I will.
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Well, I can tell you, you're in the right committee, because everybody in here is brave because they signed the dotted line to give their life to this great country. But I'm still undecided. I mean, we have gone through this in different variations several times. Nothing you just told me has swayed me to think that succession is succession, regardless of the different formalities that you put it through, or lack of a better word, the different explanations. I'm sorry, but I need a little bit more to, you know, feel like I've gotten, you know, the answer I need.
Can you do that in a minute?
I can do it in the following way. I would love to have that conversation with you. If you vote for the study commission, we can have those conversations, because we're not saying with the study committee that it's a given. It's saying, hey, what are the problems? And if we agree these are the problems, what are the solutions?
The best part about not being the chair is I can hand that over to Chair Moffett.
But, you know, I think at a minimum, you have to recognize that the problems we're facing federally need to be addressed in some way. And so if you have a better idea than us going independent, and of course independence, and I think this is important for the committee to understand, for me, I look at independence as a spectrum, right? So secession is the farthest anchor. I'm a lawyer by training. I understand negotiation. If you want something, maybe you start there so you can start to incrementally get other things, right? So maybe we should be looking at nullification more seriously.
Okay, the clock is ticking, but Representative Levitt, you had your hand up again.
You got my vote
Okay.
for a subcommittee.
Hey, yes, I'll take it.
Thank you. Anything else for the speaker, Ms. Gorecki? Ms. Gorek. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.